Charles Dickens lived in Southwark as a teenager 200 years ago, and there are reminders of him everywhere. In his bestseller Little Dorrit, the heroine's father was the longest-serving resident of the Marshalsea debtors' prison. And this is where fact and fiction meet, because Dickens' own father was jailed at the self-same Marshalsea prison on this very spot when Charles was 12 years old. Dickens' books are littered with references to places in Southwark that he would have known when he lived here, such as the nearby church of St George the Martyr, where Little Dorrit was baptised, married, and even sought refuge in the vestry. Father Ray Andrews is the parish priest of St George's and something of a Dickens enthusiast.
From the moment I came in, really, I became very aware of how important Dickens has been to the congregation, to this church, to people who visit here. I was presented with a copy of Little Dorrit and presented with a copy of The Life of Our Lord, which is one of Dickens' maybe lesser-known writings. It was a simplified version of the Gospels that Charles Dickens wrote for his children, because he wanted his children to know about the life of Christ. And, of course, I constantly get requests from groups of people from all over the world who want to arrange to come in to see the church, to see the various things that are related to Dickens here.
What was his faith? How important was his faith to him?
I think that his faith comes across in his writing. I think it's very clear to me that Dickens had a great sense of good. He's very much a New Testament man. You know, social gospel is there in everything he writes. He mistrusted piety and religiousness. He hated hypocrisy, and that comes across in several of his kind of clerical characters in his books. I think that the characters that he writes about that are abusive, that are not good, sort of represent departures from Christian values, and that the good characters, you know, represent humility and kindness and forgiveness. And so, for me, his faith shines through in all of that, really.
It is I, John Sargent.
Jo Brand made her name as an outspoken comedian, but more recently she's turned her hand to writing novels and has drawn some of her inspiration from Charles Dickens.
I've always thought about Dickens that he actually has a far richer tapestry of women characters than many writers of the time. And he also kind of wrote for everybody, you know. His novels were originally kind of just serialised in magazines for everybody that wanted to read them, and people kind of read them almost like they were comics, you know. They couldn't wait to get the next kind of episode. And it was kind of like EastEnders for Victorian people, really.
You might be surprised to learn that she's also a lover of organ music.
Ready for a coffee break?
Oh, I'm ready for an extremely long coffee break.
That's sounding good. You could sing to that. It's too slow.
You're a very bad liar.
No, it is sounding good.
She met Father Ray whilst learning to play the church organ and is now a regular visitor to St George's.
He, to me, kind of really made the church attractive again in a lot of ways. I think to some extent we're all searching for something that isn't part of our kind of real day-to-day existence, if you like. And I feel like I'm kind of no different from anybody else, but I've kind of found that difficult to find it through abstract concept, shall we say, and kind of having met Ray, I suppose I just kind of feel so pleased that someone like him's kind of in the church, and it's sort of, in a way, I wouldn't say it's kind of reignited any faith that I have, because I'm not sure even as a child that I wasn't just agnostic all the way through. I always kind of had big questions, but it's certainly kind of going in the right direction, I suppose. I would say I was still a Christian with a small c, really. I think Jesus was a great bloke, and I have far more affinity with Jesus, really, because I think he was a bit of a socialist, and he kind of went round saying, you know, don't be horrible to people, look after people who are weak, treat people with kindness, that we give poor people money, that we don't pass by on the other side of the road if we see someone suffering, all that sort of thing I'm hugely behind. But, I mean, I do think that it's very difficult for humans who are flawed characters to kind of live up to those very, very demanding kind of moral values, really.
What is it about churches that you love?
Well, I think it's kind of the quietness, really, of churches and the sound in them. And I always kind of think back to kind of hundreds of years ago when communities would just have kind of like tiny little jerry-built cottages, but kind of a church in the middle of it. And people must have just thought, what an amazing place. And you could see why people would think that it was God's house, because it just was so different from anything else in the area.